First game was Friday. But because I got to call the game, I got to watch the game, dissect the game from literally every single play, got to talk with Craig Albernaz during the game and some of the other players. And I want to preface this. Spring training is spring training for a reason. But there are a few things that I do believe are worth noting. So here are a few of my impressions, at least from what I've seen from the Baltimore Orioles. And then, Zach, you can give me some of yours as well. But I think the first one, above all, I think that you and I would both say, is the presence of one polar bear Pete. Pete Alonso was the headliner in the offseason, and then from the first game until now, he has set that tone. You can argue he was setting that tone earlier in camp. You were hearing him being very vocal during live BPs with some very colorful banter. And then during the game, just competing, wanting to be in there. And then on top of it, he's launched 2 jacks in 2 games, which is kind of the cherry on top. But, Zach, that is probably my first impression, was that Pete Alonso as a leader, and not just by his actual stats. If you watch the broadcast or you saw any social media posts, he interacts with the team as much as anybody. He is so in tune with asking his teammates about what they're seeing, talking, hitting. He is embracing the entire role of being a team guy. And I really do think his significance is going to stretch way beyond the field of play. And so far, I think if we're talking about that investment, Zach, it looks like Pete's going to fit in extremely well and be a huge need on that side in that clubhouse.
Yeah, and exactly what you said. The home runs are super dope. That is pretty cool. Awesome. Yeah. Anytime you know, it's that shiny new toy and it does exactly what you were hoping it would do, like that's a fun feeling. But I'm glad you mentioned the stuff in the clubhouse and in the dugout, because that's where Pete Alonso has caught my attention. Like I said, the stuff that he does on the field, the home runs, you expect that from Pete. There are a lot of guys that hit home runs in Major League Baseball. But it's the fact of them traveling to the Tigers yesterday. It is I think it was the 6th inning. Everyone is out. All the starters are out. You're probably in your first-ish, end of your second wave of players. Maybe you're getting into your third wave of players playing. And Pete Alonso is on the front step of the dugout, calling players over and screaming across the dugout for these young guys to come over to talk about what he's seeing, what others are seeing from this pitcher. And then they go out, and I think the one guy hit a double that next at bat. His first home run was in his 3rd at bat of the game. And that's significant because everyone else got 2 at bats. Why did Pete Alonso get a 3rd? Because Pete wanted to. Because Pete went to the coaching staff and was like, hey, if I'm not playing tomorrow, I want to get as much work in as possible. And that includes, I'm okay going out into the field and playing more because that's going to get me ready. But I also want to see as many pitchers as possible. He goes out and hits a home run. That's awesome. But the lesson was the fact that he went out there and he looked at his coaching staff, was like, hey, I know that usually guys like me are only sort of just getting started. You know, they're only getting 1 or 2 at bats and then we go from there. He wants to compete. He wants to go out there and be the best. And that's showing it through action. That's not just saying, hey, I'm going to change a culture. That's changing it in real time. Not being afraid to say, hey, Albie, not very happy with my first 2 at-bats. Hit that one line drive in the gap. Center fielder made an incredible play on it. Saying, I want to see another guy. If they have a 3rd pitcher out there for me to face, I want to see as many guys as possible because that competitive juice is contagious. Goes out there, hits a bomb, and then gets to trot around the bases. It just felt like everything coming together of every aspect that we've talked about and that we've heard about Pete Alonso, from Buck Showalter, Jim Duquette, everyone at the winter meetings. They're like, hey, yeah, this guy, he hits bombs. That's pretty good. You know, you might have seen a few of them, but it's what he does in the clubhouse. Every guy in spring training, when asked about in the first few days about Pete Alonso being there, they talked about him being a leader. That's why you got him. We talked about it so much last year that felt like maybe they had missed that veteran leader that you had with the Kyle Gibsons, the James McCanns in the years prior. This is a guy that from the beginning, from right now, it's pretty clear. You want to talk about a leader that's been added to the clubhouse. It's been Pete Alonso.
And his hitters as well. What I love what Pete's doing. So before his first home run, he was on the on deck circle, and there was a camera shot that went back to him talking to his talking to the bench. And I asked Pete that question at the next half inning on what were you guys talking about? And he says, I love getting feedback from my teammates on what they see, what's going on, what's the report. He wants all that info. But the biggest thing that he said is, I want from what anybody's seen on this guy firsthand, I want to know that component. And that's how you want to talk in a dugout, by the way. And that's not saying what they weren't doing before. I'm not going to say that. But what I am saying about with Pete, that type of mindset gets you thinking more. That type of mindset allows more conversation, and maybe that opens up a thought for what a hitter might try to work on or what he might pick up. It's contagious that way. The phrase that I always like to use was use your eyes. And then once you use your eyes, communicate that with others. Because when you have those dialogues off of what you're seeing, as well as what the information that's telling you, that's when you can get the best results. And so I thought that was really a great message that Pete was doing so far, and I expect that to continue. Now, number 2 for impression, Zach, I got the full, organic, authentic, that Albie don't give a shit type of mentality, and he is a guy that just loves ball. And that was something for me this weekend. I have talked to him. I love his demeanor. His excitement and enthusiasm in the dugout in the second inning could have done the whole inning himself. Why? Because he was so interactive. But you could see how amped up he is about the game. And what I like about it is he's in tune. He wants to have that energy in that clubhouse, in that dugout. But this is everything that I've heard. And what you want from your team is your manager to have this type of energy, but also what he expects on a day-to-day. And if you don't reach that same goal of what your day-to-day job is, that there will be, you have to be accountable for that. And I think that's the part that I see. We're going to be passionate. We're going to play this game hard. We're going to play this game with energy. And then above all, we're going to have attention to detail. And if we're not doing that, yeah, we're going to talk about that. It's the accountable side. But I also just think for the city of Baltimore, Zach, him just showcasing who he is, I think that Oriole fans, if you saw that, you go, man, I love that this is how he's going to act. I love that. I can tell that he is super passionate and he's not holding anything back, right? You know, with certain managers throughout baseball, you can sit there and go, I wonder how they are. You know, what is that demeanor? Is that just coach speak? Well, in that moment, you can see, no, that's just Albie being Albie. We didn't ask him anything. He didn't hold anything back. He was just reacting to the game because he's a gamer. He's a grinder. He loves it. So that'd be my second thing, Zach. I loved what Albie had brought together. Is there another point besides him that maybe stuck out to you over the first couple of days?
I mean, if we want to talk about things that just kind of got me fired up, was one, you could see it in some of the young pitchers. There's just an energy, I think, and that's the big word that I think describes just kind of what we've said about the new additions and everything is it's energy, because you go out there and it starts with Craig Albernaz. It starts there, and then it goes to Pete Alonso, and then it's been infectious throughout the entire clubhouse. Guys like Trey Gibson going out there 3 scoreless against the Yankees. That's awesome to see from a young guy. Yes, the statistics don't matter, but to a young guy like that, it does. Tyler O'Neill showing up healthy, getting 2 knocks in his first game. It just felt like everyone is sort of showing up with this different feeling than in years past. Like you just see this through the way that they are working in practice, all the videos you see. Guys, we're doing day 2. We're already doing situational hitting Albernaz in an interview after, he's like, yeah, I'm trying to change the mindset of this team. We're trying to be like, okay, guy on third, we just get him in. And I think that's what you're really starting to see is it starts with Albernaz. And that's why I think all of us became kind of bullish on him after the interviews, after talking to him, after hearing about what everyone said about him, because it's not just, oh, this guy knows baseball. There's a lot of people out there that know baseball. This guy gets it and a level of, okay, I know what needs to be done. How do I get this across to the team? But mostly, how do I just make sure they know that we will go to war together? That's kind of the thing. It's like everything is as a unit. Okay, we're going to go out there. You can tell when you guys were talking to him, players just love to play for that guy. And you can already see it. The way he talks to players, the way he interacts with them, it really feels like a different age of Baltimore baseball because of where it starts at the top, because of what Craig Albernaz has already kind of instilled energy-wise, and going from there, I think that's why there's a lot to be excited about. They've added some great talent this offseason. I think, we're going to see Chris Bassett and those guys kind of, as the season goes or spring training goes on, we'll see them more and more. But my biggest takeaways so far have been just the new additions and the energy that they're bringing to this team. It really does feel like a new leaf has been turned in Baltimore. And it's not to say that the last team or, last year, like, oh, they didn't have anything. They got stuck behind the 8 ball early and they couldn't dig themselves up. And I think that this has just been a breath of fresh air of like, hey, it's 0-0. Like we're no longer, last year I can't even imagine how it felt from pretty much June 1st on to you're just scratching and clawing every game and you win 6 out of 7, you win 8 out of 10, and you look up and you're like, oh, we're still 9 games under. Like that's hard.
Oh, it's brutal.
And I just think that on top of the new additions, the leadership, everyone kind of getting together, I think it really is put a recipe together for success in Baltimore because, man, last year's behind us. This is a new squad. Let's go for it.
When you are losing and you have high expectations and it's just brutal day after day, and just putting it bluntly, and you're sucking. Like, you're just not saying that some aren't having good games, but collectively you ain't winning games. That sucks. And then you have to show up. You're getting criticized from the outside because the team isn't performing. There's a lot of people frustrated. So there's people, fans and people outside that are frustrated. There's a lot of frustration because internally you feel that you should be playing better than you are, and you're frustrated of where the team is. And then on top of it, you're losing. And we all know that when things don't go right, sometimes you can have that toxic feeling, that toxic environment. And not that anyone specifically is being so negative, but when there's so much negativity because there's no winning going on, it's hard to get yourself out of that. And so for the Orioles, it was, all right, this team was supposed to take that step in 25, and then they ended up being the worst team in the American League East last year. After having the most wins for 2.5 years in the AL East, yeah, that's going to bring a lot of negativity, and it brought a lot of change. And so now bringing in some veterans, new coaching staff, and a reset can allow some of these guys to go. And I'll tell you what, though, Zach, I know that the camp hasn't been forgiven in the injury's sake. I feel terribly for Westy, which we hadn't talked about yet, but his partial UCL tear is getting the PRP. We'll see what happens. I feel so bad for him. Jackson Holliday is going to miss time. You freak thing. It happens. But for me, there shouldn't be a panic, and no one cares if you're injured. You got to find a way to get through that because you're a team. You got to find a way to win. And that's why I think Albernaz bringing that Guardians, type of mentality there with Stephen Vogt. Yeah, hey, dude, we don't care what's going on. We got to go and find a way. And if we win a game that's 2-0 or 8-7, we got to find a way. We got to get the most out of our pitching staff, and we got to get the most out of our offense that day. And so I think that's the challenge that they're going to be presented with, and that's something that they're going to have to overcome. One of the final things I'll say for impressions before I talk about Jordan Westburg, Zach, is the final impressions are this team has some pieces pitching-wise that could come to fruition here sooner than we thought. And I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, Trey Gibson's going to be the next dude, and he's going to help this team right now. But I got to tell you, if you go back and watch what Trey has done in the minor leagues and you saw his first outing, there's a lot to like with what he can do. Chase McDermott, if he can clean up his mechanics and get comfortable getting his 98-mile-an-hour heater over to set up his other off-speed pitches, there's a lot to like with his upside. And then other guys that could take that step. Grant Wolfram, dude, there is so much potential with him. And I know he came over, but when you have a lefty that throws 98 and he has a curveball that can go and run into righties, there's a lot to like, but you got to refine the game. But there are parts of that pitching side that are very appealing. And then obviously the starting side, yeah, Trevor Rogers, man, I don't think it's going to be a fluke. I think that 80% of Trevor Rogers is an all-star. 100% of Trevor Rogers, he's the best pitcher in the American League. That's the beauty of it. But Rogers looks confident. He looks comfortable. And I think the rest of the staff, knock on wood, stays healthy. They're going to have more options than I think people understand and even probably anticipated with this Orioles pitching staff.